If you clicked on this video, let me tell you something. You won't regret it, because I'm going to show you a fabulous line to win tons of games with the white pieces. Why are you so convinced, Chestiker, that this line is so fabulous? First, because it's in an opening that you all know. Second, because it's super easy to play, you'll understand it perfectly, and I'm going to try to explain it in the simplest way possible. And third, and most important of all, because your opponents, they won't know how to play against it. I assure you, from my own personal experience, that your opponents don't know how to play this line. All right, Chestiker, let's get started. You really sold me on this. Let's see if it's really as strong as you're saying. Let's go for it. E4, E5, we're talking about the two most famous moves in chess, right? Knight to F3, so we're still following the most standard moves. Knight to C6, and now we continue with which opening? With the Spanish opening. An opening we love on this channel because of its versatility and all the options it gives us to win. In this case, I'm going to show you a line you've never seen before in your life. Most likely here, they're going to play the most common move, which is A6, kicking out this bishop. We're simply going to move it back, and now, after any move, like for example, knight to F6, which is the most common in this position, we're going to play the key move. This line also works if they play B5, so basically, no matter what they play, you'll pretty much be able to use this line here. Alright, let's start with knight to F6 and see how this line would continue. What move we could make here. I'm sure all of you are thinking about castling, D3, maybe even D4, C3, knight to C3, one of those. But I'm absolutely sure that none of you thought of queen to E2. It's a move that seems strange, right? But it's an incredible move. A really, really good move. The queen is in a very good position. What are we threatening here? Pay attention, we're threatening the following. Bishop takes knight. And when they capture, now that we have this pawn well defended, we could capture this pawn over here. In other words, with queen to E2, we're directly threatening to win a pawn. Right? Queen to E2 doesn't really look like it's threatening to win a pawn, does it? So here, if your opponent gets distracted and plays something silly, just bishop takes knight and then knight takes pawn, and you'll win a pawn. Very good, Chestnut. Up to this point, it seems fantastic to me. For now, you're absolutely right. If they slip up here, I'll win a pawn, and this opening is incredible. But let's see, a lot of people are going to notice this, right? Now you defend the pawn, I play b5, and you can't capture my knight anymore. Absolutely nothing happens. In fact, this is actually part of my plan, okay? We simply move the bishop back. Why? Because now we have a spectacular plan, and you'll understand why it's so important to have the queen on n2. The queen on n2 is an ultra-functional move, meaning it serves a ton of purposes. The first one is the one we already mentioned, right? We're subtly threatening to win this pawn without anyone noticing. That's why, many times, you're going to win. If not, and they play this move here, we're going to pull the bishop back and continue with our plan, which you'll see is super easy. Now, what's the most normal thing they should do? Well, most likely they'll keep developing their pieces. For example, this bishop here. Honestly, it doesn't matter to us because we want to play a 4. And there's pretty much no move on the board that can stop us from playing it, right? All right, once we play a 4, what's the idea? Here, you should stop for a moment and think. All right, pay close attention. Stop saying all right and pay attention, chess teacher, because all you do is talk, and in the end, I don't understand the position. Sorry, it's just that I want to make it super clear here that we're obviously threatening to capture the pawn. Not only because it's threatened by 2 pieces, and we'd win a pawn here, but also because they simply couldn't recapture, since we take the rook. Piece it? Very important. So they absolutely have to react. They have to react. There's no time to defend this. They only have 2 ideas, right? Advance or capture. If they capture, what would happen? Well, it's very simple. We would just capture with the bishop, and everything they've done with this advance here would have been for nothing. This bishop keeps applying pressure, the queen keeps applying pressure, and the rook is on an open file where this point will be very easy to attack. In short, to sum it up quickly, if they capture here, you should be happy. If they don't capture and do anything else, you'll win a pawn. And if they play b4, which is maybe the trickiest option, pay attention because this is where our evil plan begins. Alright? Our plan, let's call it the evil plan, but it's our plan for this opening, okay? How will we start? While it's very important to start with the move d4, this move is key. I know I always say you shouldn't memorize moves, but of course there are exceptions. And here you should be understanding as you learn the moves. There aren't many, okay? We're talking about 6 or 7 moves. If you learn 6 or 7 moves and the plan, you'll be able to play this in all your games. Why do we play d4 here? Well, because they have to make a decision. Right now, we're threatening to win a pawn. Since we have 2 pieces attacking the e5 square, and not only that, we're also threatening this possible advance, putting a lot of pressure on our opponent, because this knight would be left with very few squares to go to. That's why here they have several options, but by far the most common is to capture this pawn here, and then see what happens. Well, punishing this is really easy, since this pawn has simply been diverted and we can advance our king's pawn to e5. We're putting a lot of pressure on the knight. The queen, as I mentioned, serves many purposes. At first it was defending, then it attacked here, and now it supports this advance. Look how well placed this queen is here. They have to move this knight died. They can't go here or here, which would seem like the 2 best squares, and in both cases, they lose a piece. If they retreat, they'd be losing castling again, and on top of that, they'd also be falling behind in development. Also, this knight wouldn't be able to get out anywhere, because if it tries to go here, we capture it. So after this advance, we've come to a conclusion. I'm breaking it down for you so you really understand. And if I just tell you the moves, you won't remember them later. But if I explain it like this, I'm sure you'll remember. Alright, so they can't go forward or backward. They have to go to one of these 2 squares, right? From my own experience, I can tell you that this square here is the one most often used. And then they attack this pawn with 2 pieces. However, thanks to our queen on e2, this pawn is completely protected. There's no need to worry about them capturing that pawn. So how shall we continue when they jump in with the knight here? Well, we have several ideas. Surely one good idea would be to bring the knight over here to attack, but there's an even better one. One that I really love, which would be a 3. In the example game I'm using for this video, a 3 wasn't played. Instead, queen to e4 was played. Both are completely valid. Why? Because what they're doing is just driving this knight away. Nothing more than that. If they reinforce it, now we could even attack, right? Alright, so if this was played, the knight is being attacked. In the game, it was pulled back over here. And notice that simply by exchanging this bishop for this knight and doubling the king's pawns, the position of the black pieces is a complete mess. There's a threat to bring the bishop here and the queen to deliver some kind of checkmate. We're going to castle and we'll recover this pawn here. And without a doubt, the position of the white pieces is vastly superior. When we capture this pawn with the knight, we'll also be putting pressure on this other knight, which, thanks to the queen, is indirectly pressuring the rook. As you can see in this first example, this opening shows a lot of promise. And now I have to show you a detail that's going to blow your mind right in this line we're analyzing. Don't worry, if we go back in the opening, it's so you can remember it much better. We lose 20 seconds, sure, but it'll be much clearer in your mind. Bishop to b5, we pin the knight. a6, we pull the bishop back to a4, for example, knight to f6, and what do? Queen to e2, precisely to threaten what? To capture this knight. That's why they play b5. We pull the bishop back, and now, ladies and gentlemen, wherever they go, we want to play a4. We've seen the following. If they capture, it's a mistake. If they don't capture, it's a mistake. So the usual thing is for them to push the pawn. And once they push the pawn, the key move was d4. What have we seen here? You'll remember, right? I'm trying to recall that most people would capture, but there's another move that's played in the No, not in the 90s, no. Sorry, my percentages are a bit all over the place, aren't they? Let's call it, if the other one was 40%, this one's another 40%. Between capturing and the move I'm about to mention, that's how most games are played. Come on, chess teacher, just say it already. p6. Why? Well, precisely because in the Spanish opening, d6 is almost always played. d6 is almost always played. Alright? It simply develops the bishop, or rather, it creates a space to develop the bishop. Plus, it reinforces the point we just attacked. But this is a mistake where they could already resign. d6 here, they could already resign because of the move queen to c4. Pay attention to how important this queen on n2 was. We're threatening checkmate thanks to the bishop. And we're also threatening this money. A totally devastating double attack that there's no way to stop. That is, if they try to stop the checkmate, for example by castling, which is what I often see. In many games, we simply capture this knight and end up with an extra piece. From here, it's just a matter of technique to win the game, since you'll already have a piece advantage. And here, you might also come across a game. For example, I had a game where it continued like this. They captured this pawn here with the knight. With what idea? With the idea that now, when I made this move, the king could escape. But look how simple it is. I just come here with the bishop. I play bishop to e6, check. The king has to escape to f6, and now I simply trade. Sorry, I'm going off memory here. Before bringing in the bishop, I actually traded this knight. And why exactly? So I could bring in the bishop without it being captured. Sorry, I'm just recalling this from melee. Don't worry, everything's correct. From here, yes, the king has to move here, and you simply place the bishop to give check and capture the rook. From this point, you're going to win a rook, a completely clean advantage. Even if they capture your bishop, it's no big deal, because the queen is the one responsible for winning material. Here, again, in the first line, you won a knight. Now you win a rook. So you should come to the conclusion that when you play d4, if they capture you, meek, that's a mistake. If they play d6 against you, meek, that's a huge mistake. Even worse. But they can also play d4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, a6, bishop a4, knight f6, and now here, what are we going to play? Queen to e2? This is the key, right? With threatening this b5, bishop to b3, and now, for example, they develop the bishop. In this example I'm giving you, the bishop comes over here. It's perhaps the most solid square when the bishop starts coming this way, right? Well, there are other squares, they can also come here, but the plan is pretty similar because we want to break with a4. We've seen all the options, and there's one I haven't explained to you yet. And it's interesting because it's a very good move for black. They might play it against you, and it's rook to b8, okay? This move is correct. It's correct and it's good. And I'm going to explain why and what you should do. Now they're moving away from the pin, you should capture and now play knight to c3. A spectacular move. Although the knight sometimes usually comes out, via d2, precisely to avoid this kind of advance. What we want is to force this kind of advance. Take a good look. We're attacking with the knight and the queen, and it's very hard to defend this point. If they defend it with the bishop, thanks to the rook, we capture it, and the same goes for the knight. In other words, as you can see, we're basically forcing this pawn to advance. And now, what we're simply going to do is place our knight here on d5, and our position is an absolute bargain. If they trade knight for knight, whether you recapture with the pawn or the bishop, you'll have a super good position. If they don't trade knights and play b6, continuing to develop their pieces, your position is still fabulous. Even if black has played their opening perfectly, because honestly, thanks to rook to b8, they've played very well. This position is much more comfortable to play with the white pieces. You castle, push this pawn, and develop your other bishop. Also, notice that this rook is tied down to defense, while ours can break in whenever and wherever we want, as many times as we like. What I'm about to tell you is a secret, okay? Pay attention, what did we just do? We just played queen to e2, and since our bishop was kicked out, we placed it here, right? Now, what was next? Break through with a4. And we've seen what happens if they try to develop the bishop, but what if they manage to solidify everything with d6? Well, here we have a master move, a real master move. A 4, as always, but why does it work so well now? Because now, look closely, we have an incredible discovered attack. Bishop takes on f7. Thanks to our queen, when the king captures, we come in with queen to c4, and we'll win this knight. What have you achieved with this, Justiker? Well, now let's suppose, for example, they defend over here. I've simply won a pawn, okay? I've won a pawn, but not only that, look where the king is. He'll never be able to cast it again, he's very exposed, and we're perfectly fine. This pawn is weak, we're going to castle, and we're a pawn up. And once again, a completely winning position. And what happens, chess teacher, if the bishop comes out to c5? As I said, here I've set up another example so you can see that this opening always works. First, I push these pawns, and it really doesn't matter what they do to us. And now bishop to c5, right? See how it doesn't make any difference? But we can keep playing the same way. Normal moves here, knight to m6. Well, pay attention. They've fallen into the trap again. A 4. And now, when the pawn advances, if they capture, it's the same situation as before. You already know. When the pawn advances, just bishop takes on f7 again. Why? You're seeing it already, right? Because now, simply queen to c4 again, not the knight this time, but the bishop. Notice that earlier I placed it on e7 so you could see that all these ideas with the bishop here don't work. And now we would just capture the bishop and we're in the same situation, right? A pawn up, the king can't castle, and we have a much better position than our opponent. And that's it for today's video. I'm going to ask you to leave me a big like, because lately I've noticed that YouTube is recommending my videos a little less. That means a lot of you might miss them, and I want YouTube to keep recommending them day after day. So do me a favor, especially if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't like the video, that's okay. But if you really value the free content I upload every day, and you enjoy it, leave me a big like, a comment, anything. It will help me so much. Way more than you think. I hope you loved it. I explained everything with all my heart. And I'll see you tomorrow with another new video, friends. Goodbye.